How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've got a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by a registered dietitian, personal trainer, and competitive powerlifter. Today, I am joined by the one and only Dan Feldman. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, my friend. How are you?
I am not so bad. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. How are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
Things have been good. Can't complain. I'm here in the I'm technically I'm in New Jersey, in the United States, but for all intents and purposes, I'm right across the river from New York. So enjoying the fall weather here. Yeah, man, living the life. Lifting weights. I hit a deadlift PR yesterday, which was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, doing my thing.
Awesome. And how is that into building up to a competition? Do we have competitions on the horizon? How's your own sort of training and coaching going as well?
Yeah. So I actually do have a just a local meet coming up in November, which I'm doing more so just for fun. I'm not like ultra elite or anything like that. For reference, I pulled 475 pounds, and I yesterday, and I weigh about like 150 pounds,
Okay.
151, 152. So I mean, I'm not like breaking any world records or anything like that, but just lifting because I love it, and the competitions are fun too. It's a USA PL meet. So yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely caught the powerlifting bug then getting there, getting some
Yeah.
competitions in. So obviously, it was a brief introduction that I made there, but for anyone listening who might not know your background in terms of becoming a registered dietitian, personal trainer, obviously competing in powerlifting, could you just give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, I'm a registered dietitian, and I also have a master's degree in human nutrition. So I got that from the University of Delaware here on the East Coast of the United States, and then got the credential for the registered dietitian at Long Island University in the United States here, and I'm also a certified personal trainer through NASA, and as you said, I am a semi-competitive power lifter. Like again, I'm not like an elite lifter by any means, but it is something that I really enjoy. Um, yeah, and I mean, my interests are, understandably pretty very much in sort of the strength, hypertrophy, fat loss, weight management kind of realm. I do have a private practice, an online private practice for nutrition, whereby I mean, I do have people sometimes come to me for medical issues, IBS, Crohn's, things of that nature. But a lot of people are more looking for weight management or nutrition for strength, performance, or hypertrophy. Interestingly, most of my clients use their health insurance. So here in the United States, many people are able to see a dietitian through their health insurance rather than having to just pay directly out of pocket. So actually, most of my clients, at least for the nutrition stuff, use their health insurance for that. I do some online programming as well for some people for resistance training, and that's separate from insurance. But the main thing that I do is counseling, nutritional counseling through my private practice through insurance, and like I said, helping people whether it be weight management or nutrition related to strength, hypertrophy, performance, stuff like that.
Yeah, and with that, because obviously, I've mentioned, training yourself, enjoying the strength training yourself. Was it always kind of the goal to become a registered dietitian and help sort of, people wanting to manage their weight or help improve their performance through nutrition? How did you sort of gravitate towards that?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. Originally, when I was in my teenage years, getting ready to apply to colleges, universities, I actually wanted to be a professional guitarist. I wanted to be a professional musician, believe it or not. That was where my really interests were. But then, as I was starting college, I realized that it's very difficult to make a living as a professional musician, and I wanted it to be more of a hobby. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And around that time, my freshman year at university, I really started to get into lifting weights, just something I kind of, got into. I had when I was quite a bit younger, maybe when I was like 9, 10, 11 years old, I did struggle a little bit with my weight. I was a little bit overweight. I had also struggled a little bit through my teenage years with an eating disorder, disordered eating habits. So all of that, that kind of history, along with the interest in lifting weights, gravitated me towards wanting to pursue a profession that was related to nutrition or fitness and that kind of stuff. So my freshman year, I met with my academic advisor. She mentioned dietetics, and that if I were to do that, I could become a registered dietitian. I thought that sounded all cool and official, so I decided to do that. And yeah, so and then I stuck with that, and also got the master's degree along the way, and yeah, I became a registered dietitian, and here we are.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I always like to ask sort of, because how you gravitate towards from something that you enjoy or an interest, and then actually that develops into something that you do as a career, as a job, from either interest of your own in terms of strength training, or wanting to help other people. So yeah, I always like to see what was that progression, because sometimes I know for myself it was kind of, I fell into coaching as opposed to this is exactly what I want to do, but then obviously you get that interest and build it up from there. So obviously you mentioned there about working with people who are strength who get involved in strength training, and I kind of wanted to pick your brains and chat about maybe the misconceptions around nutrition when it comes to people wanting to get involved in strength training. And from you mentioned you getting involved in strength training to then becoming a registered dietitian, kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on your experiences of working with people with kind of the old school versus maybe new school mentality around nutrition of, well, if you're doing strength training, you can just eat what you want, eat lots of it, and you're going to be able to lift lots of weight because mass moves mass. But then, that train of thought of, well, actually, we need to think about how much of it are we eating the right things. Have you come across that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely, there are sort of a lot of old schools of thought, that a lot of people have. A lot of people come into strength training, or they see me and wanting to gain strength and gain muscle with a lot of sort of preconceived notions that may or may not be accurate. What you're saying of people who might think I just have to eat everything and then lift. Now, it might be the case for someone who is naturally very skinny. Not that this is really a scientific term, but the quote unquote ectomorph. That advice might be helpful in that their default might be not eating very much, or kind of just lots and lots of non-exercise activity, fidgeting a lot, and they have trouble gaining weight. That particular advice, if they were to make a conscious effort to eat more and lifting weights and following a well-structured resistance training program for that particular individual, that might be helpful. That said, again, I'm in the United States, so I'll refer to Americans.
Yeah.
Most Americans probably don't need that advice. I mean, the majority of Americans, generally have overweight or obesity, so they don't necessarily need to just eat tons and tons more. But I know this seems kind of obvious. When it comes to gaining strength or gaining muscle, if that's your goal, the most important thing is your training. Okay, like and that is something I actually just posted about on my Instagram today. But a lot of people really, really micromanage their nutrition, where they overthink it. But we have to remember that the resistance training is the stimulus that's telling your body to build muscle, or to get stronger on particular movements. Like that is the biggest driver. The nutrition facilitates that. And with nutrition, it's important. Obviously, we need to be eating enough calories and enough protein to provide our body with the raw materials to actually build that lean tissue, right? And exactly how much protein or how many calories, that's going to vary tremendously, just depending on the person, depending on their goals. If they're also trying to lose fat, or not. Getting sufficient carbohydrate, is for most people is pretty important to have productive training sessions, so they have the energy to get through those sessions. They have glycogen, etc. And eating enough fat is important just for overall health. Ensuring that your hormones are where they should be, and ensuring that you don't die, right? And then there's obviously other things that are important: getting enough sleep, managing stress, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that one of the, kind of like I said, one of the biggest misconceptions is that people focus so much on their nutrition, or like you said, they just think they just have to eat everything.
Yeah.
But they maybe undervalue the importance of their strength training program. And I'm sure you've seen it too. People follow suboptimal programs. Maybe they are doing the whole kind of muscle confusion thing. I see this a lot, where people are, trying to always change their workout routine, or every couple of weeks they're changing the exercises. And, as I'm sure that while there's room for some exercise variation to keep things interesting, we want to keep the fundamentals of our program pretty similar on a week-to-week basis, generally speaking, so that we're not spending all this time learning new movements, right? And we're able to actually build lean mass, right? So yeah, that's just, one thing I see a lot is people not really focusing on ensuring that they are training effectively, and maybe over focusing on the nutrition there.
Yeah. From that, just building on from there, because there's sometimes the trainer thought that people sort of focus on the minutiae of the training programs and kind of think about, oh well, I just need more accessories, or if they move away from the compound lifts and focus more on isolation exercises. Do you think sometimes, from what you've said about there, people focus on the minutiae of nutrition, sort of, focusing on one areas and trying these different workouts, trying these different nutrition plans, rather than similar to the workouts, focus on the big rocks of what is actually going to allow me to build muscle, get stronger, improve my performance?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we see it a lot with nutrition, and I'm sure you see it with training clients as well. They're trying to do the ultra kind of like wacky exercise, or the weird trick, or whatever it is, but the fundamentals are the fundamentals. And yeah, with nutrition, definitely I see people like, oh, this weird diet, this magical diet that is being sold, that's going to be the secret, right? People are looking for the kind of minutia, or the secret, or trying to get everything perfect with their macros. In a similar vein, we could say kind of a similar thing about supplements, right? People like to focus on, oh, this minutia, like of this supplement or that supplement, and or whatever is being marketed to them, and thinking that that's going to be the secret to their gains. Whereas I'm sure, obviously, a few supplements like creatine and monohydrate, and potentially a protein supplement, and maybe a few others can have some benefits, but by and large, that's a pretty small percentage of what's really most important. So if we're focusing on or minutia, like meal timing, people getting really focused about having the post-workout meal, right? And there is there's a kernel of truth to that, to paying some attention to meal timing, or similar thing with people talking about spacing out their meals, protein timing, having different protein feedings each day. And it's not that stuff doesn't matter at all. There is some credence to that stuff, but it's far less important than the big picture. So to your point, we may see people focusing on that stuff, or this supplement or that supplement, or getting in 9 servings of protein per day or whatever it is, but meanwhile they are, eating like way less than they need to. They're eating like 1,200 calories per day or something like that. They're not going to gain any muscle, or they're eating 50 grams of protein per day, or they're just going to the gym and just kind of doing whatever, and they're not following a program, right? Doesn't matter how optimal your supplementation is or how optimal your protein feeding window is, if you don't have the big rocks in place of, and for most people, utilizing largely compound movements, and ensuring that your program facilitates progressive overload, right? So that over time, you're able to quantifiably measure progress, particularly with these compound movements, eating enough calories and protein, not doing like stupid stuff with like your sleep, sleeping enough, and just, that's the stuff that really matters. And I think that a lot of people overlook that stuff because it's not sexy.
Definitely. The thing that you said there is, overlook it, and it isn't the most exciting thing in the world. We touched on it a little bit earlier of, the fundamentals. We need to do them consistently. Again, mentioned earlier about, swapping and changing programs at every couple of weeks. You need to have that consistency and build that up. A couple of things that just what you touched on there. Obviously, you mentioned over in the US about people eating, too much.
Sure.
However, you might have seen there, and we touched on it with protein, is that, well, probably two things from there. Do you find that even if people are eating too much, they're sometimes still under eating protein, and why do you think that is? And do you think, in terms of the supplements side of things, that people just find that as the easy option rather than trying to get actual whole food in? And kind of what's your thoughts or approach to supplements? I realize there's quite a lot of questions there.
Yeah. So on the first point, as far as people, like kind of the typical, if we just look at like the typical kind of sedentary American, yes, they're probably overeating calories. And I mean, they're generally going to be getting enough protein to fulfill their kind of basic needs. Like the recommended daily allowance here is 0.8 to a gram per kilogram of body weight. That's just for general health. It's not for lifting weights. As far as sort of the amount of protein that's optimal for building muscle, which, oftentimes we see 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram around, for most Americans. We probably want to go by lean mass, if they're significantly overweight. But my guess, and just kind of from my practical experience, is that the majority of Americans, if you just look at the typical American, they're probably not getting an amount of protein that's optimal for muscle gains. Probably, even if they're overeating calories most of the time. That said, that's not like that wouldn't be the number one thing I would focus on if that kind of stereotypical American came to me and they wanted to build muscle and strength. That wouldn't be the first thing that I would necessarily try to correct. But I would say that most people, unless they are consciously eating a lot of protein dense foods like some bodybuilders might, they're probably not getting in that optimal range. As for why, most convenience foods, at least here, that contribute to the issues with obesity, they're not really protein dense foods. It's more, calorie dense foods that are more so dense in carbohydrates and fats that contribute to a lot of the excess calorie consumption of people, at least here in the United States. Again, I can't really speak to other countries. And generally speaking, foods that are higher in carbs and fats tend to be more palatable, right? Because it's or more specifically, simple sugars and fats they kind of hit those dopamine sensors and that dopamine, and it makes sense on an evolutionary level, right? We're primed to like sugar. It's fruit that contains sugar. It's basically indicative that it's ripe and nutritious, and things that we would find that are high in fat. Fat's a really dense source of calories. So evolution wise, it probably makes sense that we would evolve to like the taste of fat. It's dense in calories, and getting in enough calories is more of an issue when we were evolving, right? But so that's probably partly why it's just difficult to get in protein, like optimal amount of protein by default. Just the foods that we generally eat that taste good, if we're not really fitness oriented, tend to be not super high in protein. Now, the other part of your question was more so of like why people may rely on supplements.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would say specifically with regards to protein, I see some practitioners saying, oh, like you shouldn't rely on protein powder, and it's not good to get it from powder as opposed to food. And while, if someone's getting like 80% of their protein from protein powder, that's probably not great, because whole food sources of protein are rich in other vitamins and minerals. If we look at like animal products with B12 and zinc and iron, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that a protein supplement is something that can be very, very helpful for many people, probably the majority of people, if they want to get that optimal, 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, or again, if we corrected for fat-free mass for people who have excess body fat. For most people, a supplement, maybe 1 or 2 servings of a protein supplement per day is going to really make a big difference in helping them get there, unless they're eating lots of chicken breasts or egg whites or what have you. That said, definitely people also tend to over-rely on supplements in general. I think it just has to do with the marketing around supplements, the supplement industry. Like I said, outside of, protein powder, for the reason I mentioned, creatine monohydrate, which I'm sure, as you know, is relatively effective. Maybe, caffeine as a pre-workout, some others that have some utility like beta-alanine and L-citrulline. Most supplements, at least with regards to muscle and strength gain, don't do that much. It's you're probably familiar with like the Eric Helms and nutrition strength pyramid books, where he puts supplements at the very top, like maybe comprising 5% of your progress at the most. I would agree with that. It's something that we don't need to focus that much on.
Yeah. And with that, because it was kind of 2 good points there in terms of the supplements, matching it to that person, because especially when you talk about the general population, maybe working 9 till 5, got families, got kids, are busy trying to fit training in around that. Supplements can be, a really useful tool. Tie that into sort of the marketing from the supplements, from the supplement companies, is kind of like a perfect storm to be thinking, well, this is going to fill that gap, as opposed to the whole food that we've mentioned, and that kind of goes on to the sort of the second the other part that I wanted to talk about is sort of that health versus performance. And is there a point, because we talk about it in terms of, at the elite level, whether it's powerlifting, strongman, weightlifting, those athletes, design their nutrition around their day, around their performance. So everything is, the most optimal it can be. We've touched on sleep and recovery and those sorts of things. For the general population, do you think there's ever that shift where it goes sort of away from health, and they just think that they need to try and replicate that, but struggle because of life, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So it sounds like it's kind of like the balance between performance goals and just general health and life. And there is definitely a fine line there. I mean, we can look to extreme examples of athletes that may sacrifice their health, for their sport. I mean, I definitely think that a lot of untested strength sports might kind of fall into that realm. I'm not an expert at all on PEDs or anything like that. So, and no judgment for someone who does want to go that route, but objectively speaking, if you were just trying to optimize your health, I would imagine that using performance enhancing drugs by and large wouldn't be optimal for health and longevity necessarily. Or if we look at bodybuilding, for example, or physique, trying to get really, really, really lean, there's definitely a threshold there where if we are getting stage lean, it's a detriment to health. So there is definitely that as well. And there's also the psychological component of, does your life revolve around your sport? And unless you're in a exceedingly small percentage of the population for whom they make money by performing in their sport. I mean, I don't even know if even the elite best powerlifters in the world would even fall into that category. I mean, how much money do you really make? There comes a point where you also have to have that balance with enjoying your life. You know what I mean? And also being healthy, and it's always important for us to just be mindful of that and reminding ourselves why we're doing the sport in the first place. Is it because it's something that we just genuinely enjoy doing and we love? Are we doing it because it's a part of our identity and it's where we get our self-worth? And if we don't perform well, then we feel like we're not valuable as a human being. Is it is it to just impress others? So I do think along those lines it's important just to remind ourselves, if we are getting really, really, really into competitive powerlifting or bodybuilding or physique or anything like that, whenever we're pushing ourselves to an extreme, we just want to have that big perspective, because at the end of the day, it is just a sport, and for almost all of us, it's a hobby, rather than a profession, and it's just definitely important for us to keep that perspective.
Absolutely, I think that's a really good point. If we were professional rugby players or footballers, there's obviously a lot more money in that. I think in terms of prize money, I know for the Sheffield I think it'll be 2023 now, the powerlifting competition as well as the Arnold's. Yes, there's prize money there, but there's a large population that do powerlifting for enjoyment. I think the entry point for strength training is anyone can do it in some shape or form, whether it's powerlifting or, I think strength training is relative to the person, and the health benefits, both mental and physical, vastly outweigh, competitions. Competitions are fun. However, they're always going to be there. I know seeing one competition, there was like a Masters, an M5 lifter, and it's that thing of, you can always dip in and out of it, but making sure that in terms of health that you keep on top of that. And sort of touching on that as well from the health point of view, obviously with powerlifting or, the majority of strength sports, there are weight categories. And, there's people on both ends where they're going to try and drop weight, and sometimes a dramatic amount of weight in a short space of time, but then equally put on weight. And I kind of wanted to touch on sort of what your thoughts were, what your approach is, or sort of like best practices in terms of either losing or gaining weight, or just being able to maintain, a healthy weight and, take your time over it, a more sustainable way, if you like.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately it depends on the person. I'm definitely not one to say, someone shouldn't be cutting weight, or, it's ultimately up to you. But what I will say is I definitely think, at least if someone's competing in their first meet, their first competition, I'd advise against cutting weight for something like that. I would, advise, especially if you're relatively new to the sport, to just weigh in whatever you're going to weigh in for the day and just enjoy the process. I think that cutting weight, it should be, you should have some competition experience under your belt, and a decent amount of training experience under your belt before we really kind of start with that. We want to make sure we've got already built at least, a good foundation of muscle mass, and we're, already at least at like an intermediate level before we really sort of dive into really significant weight manipulations. I don't have a specific numbers or threshold as to what that is exactly in terms of intermediate, but that is what it is. And beyond that, as far as like drastic weight cuts, I mean, it depends on how lean someone already is. If someone has a decent amount of body fat to lose anyway, and losing that body fat might bring them closer to a healthy body composition for them, then it may not be a bad thing. But just to give yourself plenty of time before the meet. When we talk about kind of more like on the cusp, weight cuts, like the kind of a little bit more kind of drastic acute water cuts, or things like that. I think that topic deserves a whole podcast for itself, right? Kind of, more drastic weight manipulations, and we just don't want to go too far, whereby we are seriously adversely affecting our quality of life and health by doing that. There's obviously a threshold by which, if we get too lean for our body, we'll start to see those, negative health effects. So we want to be mindful of that. And we obviously, if we are going to utilize strategies like, dehydration or water manipulation, we just maybe want to be, or definitely want to be under the guidance of a coach that's very experienced in doing that, just to ensure safety. But I will say, if cutting for a particular meat just requires losing some excess body fat, and you have plenty of time to do that, and maybe following a low residue or low fiber diet, a few days before the meet, that is a pretty mild protocol, especially if it's just some fat that you ought to lose anyway, and following a low fiber diet can, for a few days, temporarily, just heading into the meet, can probably cut off an extra, 1 to, maybe depending on the person, probably 1 to 3 pounds, I would think, off the scale, to about a kilo, in metric terms. So, it really sort of depends there. And then as far as like putting on weight, I can't really see a scenario in which it would make sense to force feed yourself to increase in body weight, because I don't see how that would really improve performance. It would only promote excess fat gain. If you want to, maybe do a little bit of carbohydrate overfeeding in the period soon before the meet, like maybe that would help, maybe. But beyond that, I think ensuring that you're in maybe a small calorie surplus to ensure continued muscle growth, and maybe a little bit of maybe some carbohydrate overfeeding in the period leading up to the meet might be helpful. But I wouldn't recommend dramatically overfeeding in a period prior to a meet to like move up a weight class or move higher up in a weight class. I don't think that would improve your performance. I could be wrong, but that's just my impression there.
Yeah, I think the key thing that you said there was, we don't want to push it too far. You mentioned there, I think the phrase you used was sort of like, mild strategies that can still get the end result. I think, my thoughts on sort of the I think people attach themselves to weight classes and think that sometimes, if they go up, that it's necessarily a bad thing, or they have some preconceived ideas of what that weight class will be, whereas it's just in anything else that you are doing, the scale isn't the be all and end all of weight. It's just so that you've got similar people that you can compete against, whereas it's kind of not at all costs trying to push it so far that ultimately it has a detrimental effect on your health or your performance in terms of gaining weight. I think and be interested to hear your thoughts as well, that people will naturally move up move
Yeah.
up a weight class, especially when you sort of look at the junior lifters. You know, they're still developing, still growing, and you know they might just naturally work up the weight classes without having to sort of force feed themselves or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think a while back, like a few years back, Greg Knuckles wrote a really good article about this, about weight classes, and basically saying, more geared towards like intermediate or beginner intermediate lifters, that the weight class you are now is not the weight class that you will be most competitive in. And he presented the argument of, not necessarily trying to, especially if you're early-ish in your lifting career, of trying to cut to the absolute lowest weight class you can, and instead, opting to gradually gain muscle over the course of your training career, which might in temporarily means you're a little bit less competitive, but in the long run, when you've really built a lot of muscle mass, then you'll be more competitive in the long run. So I definitely think that makes sense for most lifters most of the time.
Yeah, and I think that's what, because I think with it's similar to what we touched on about the supplements and sort of those magic formulas or magic program that the people want to do. They kind of want it right now. They want all of the strength gains right now. Whereas actually, that long-term approach can mean that you can either, dip in and out of doing other things, take time away to actually spend building muscle, or actually just focusing on training and building those numbers a little bit more, which is sometimes forgotten sometimes, I think by people, and like you say, for that long-term development. The other side of things, because obviously we're kind of coming full circle now, or coming to the end of sort of the how you see sort of nutrition with people, getting involved in strength training or powerlifting, is competition day. So obviously we've spoken about, nutrition in and around training and, gaining weight, losing weight. What's kind of your approach to competition day? Because there's wild stories of people changing everything around, or trying different things on the day. What's kind of the best practice when it comes to food on competition day?
Yeah, so weight cutting aside, let's just say if someone does not have a particular weight class that they're worried about, we don't want to change too many variables. We generally want to, the whole point of training is to at least if you have that meat, is to train for the meat. So however we normally eat when we're performing, that's sort of what we would want to do. We don't want to change too many variables too drastically. I would say, and this is a little bit more anecdotal just for me. Like I know for me, for example, I tend to eat a little bit lower fiber in the days leading up to the meet. I mean, it's your weight cutting, that makes sense, but even not, just because again, just for me, I tend to get kind of anxious on the day of the meet. I get nervous. So the having a little bit of a less gastrointestinal demanding diet in the day or two leading up to the meet, so a little lower fiber, a little lower volume, helps prevent any, helps to mitigate any potential GI discomfort that I may experience from, anxiety or nervousness around the meet. Definitely bring a lot of food and beverages with you. Generally speaking, I would say we do want to think kind of lower fiber foods, just, so you're not bloated, you're not making trips to the bathroom, many trips to the bathroom. Powerlifting meets are generally kind of an all-day affair. From practically, what does that look like? I'd probably bring Gatorade. I mean, lots of beverages. Probably like sports beverages like Gatorade that also contain carbohydrates. You want to be consuming a lot of carbohydrates that day to make sure you've got lots of carbohydrate availability, right? It's common for people to bring like gummy candies, like gummy worms, Twizzlers, stuff like that. It's low fat, so it's quickly digesting, and it's kind of quick sugars. Maybe some protein powders. Maybe some nuts to kind of help with satiation, because those are pretty low volume as well. Some people may choose to bring, peanut butter jelly sandwiches. One thing that I do, which you and your listeners might think is really weird, but whatever, I do it, is I'll actually make a whey protein sandwich, which is basically I'll have a scoop of whey protein, I'll add maybe an ounce of water to it so it's a paste, and I'll have it on white bread. So then I'm getting some quick protein and some quick carbs, and it's chocolate, so that's always good. And it's low in fat, because fat slows down digestion, slows down gastric emptying.
An alternative Nutella sandwich.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you are weight cutting, then you'll definitely want to make sure that you've got some sports beverages. If it's a 24-hour weigh-in, if you're doing like USPA, again, I'm in the States, but if you're doing like a 24-hour weigh-in meet, it's a little bit less of an issue, and you've got 24 hours to replenish those carbohydrates, glycogen, electrolytes. But if you're doing a 2-hour weigh-in, especially if you're cutting aggressively, you do want to make sure that you have an electrolyte beverage, as soon as you've weighed in, you don't want to force feed yourself. You don't want it to like just eat everything at once or drink everything at once, but you do want to have some sports beverage to replenish electrolytes, replenish carbohydrates. I'd probably have some light food, like some of the stuff that I mentioned, and bring lots of it. It can't hurt to be over prepared there. So again, in terms of food options, just off the top of my head, water, sports beverage, protein shake, or some other sources of protein. You can do beef jerky because that's low volume. The whey protein sandwich, which might be weird, like I mentioned, I'd probably go for white bread there. Maybe some nuts, Twizzlers, gummy worms, and just have that stuff on hand. Be mindful not to eat a lot of all at once. I would do kind of more of like a grazing strategy throughout the meet, just kind of as I feel I need it. Once I've replenished, if I am, cutting, once I've replenished those fluids and whatnot, but then also just grazing as opposed to eating a lot of food at once.
Yeah. I think that's some really good points, because it doesn't want to be that case of, again, which has been a constant theme that we've touched on, is we don't have to overcomplicate things. We started talking about at the start, focusing on the minutiae, just thinking about, right, okay, what is powerlifting meets are going to be longer days. How can we apply that and make sure that we're feeling fueled throughout the day? Quite a lot of topics, and done sort of the full journey, if you like, from training to competition day. The last question that I like to ask, from everything that we've chatted about there, and for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Don't overcomplicate things. Focus on the fundamentals. If you're looking to build muscle, build strength, first, make sure you're following a well-structured training program. If it's something that's important to you, I think that, hiring a coach for that purpose, I think can be great. Make sure you eat enough calories and protein, sleep enough, manage stress to the best of your ability. Don't worry too much about supplements and all the other minutiae.
Yeah. I think I hope everyone took notes took notes on that. Some really good points. That for us chatting might sound as though, like what we said at the start, the fundamentals. However, I know sometimes that there's that much noise out there that sometimes it can get lost a little bit. Thanks a lot, Dan, for taking the time to jump on. Really appreciated it, and enjoyed chatting with you today. If anyone has any questions about what we've chatted about today, see the content that you put out there, or reach out to you, where could people find you or get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram. I'm at powerlifter dietitian, really creative name there. And also, if you want to reach out to me via email, that's dan@danfeldmanrd.com.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate you taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.